His hands were freezing cold, and his breath formed small white clouds against the dark grey sky. The snow crunched beneath his boots with every step. He wore only a jacket and no gloves, which, even for him, had not been the smartest choice. The woman in uniform walking beside him had dressed for the weather, yet she seemed no better off. Fortunately, he could see the Agathos family estate in the distance. Hopefully, the woman there would be able to tell them more about what had happened the previous night, assuming she would still want to tell them anything after hearing the terrible news he had to bring her. Manon walked silently beside him through the snow. The policewoman was in her late 40s, with a short red bob that fell neatly along her jawline. Her face was sharply defined, with a long, straight nose and steel blue eyes that often saw more than people were comfortable with, certainly more than he was. She was not someone who sought attention, but she carried a quiet determination that was difficult to ignore. Even now, with her cheeks reddened by the cold and snow striking against her coat, she seemed completely unshaken. The warmth of the house was calling to them by now. The driveway was long, but it had been cleared of snow. A light was still burning upstairs. Manon pressed the doorbell. There was the sound of movement inside, and moments later the door swung open. Standing in front of them was a flushed woman with a round face, dressed in a bathrobe. She was small, her hair pinned up with a clip. There was some sort of green paste spread across her skin. Ramin sniffed. Avocado? He raised an eyebrow and was about to introduce himself when a voice called from the top of the staircase. Brit, who is it? A moment later, laughter followed. Brit turned around and shouted upwards. An incredibly handsome man accompanied by a policewoman. Did you arrange a party for us, Ellen? Giggles came from above. No, a woman's voice laughed. Suuz? Someone called. I don't know. Let me have a look. Brit looked at them brightly and stepped aside. A beautiful blonde woman appeared in the doorway. She was wearing short pajama shorts and a top. She also had a face mask on and was clearly tipsy. And beside her, Ramin felt his mouth go dry. Standing next to her was a stunning young woman with long brown hair, a smear of green paste on her cheek, full lips, and deep green eyes. Her slender figure was covered by a satin pajama set. There was something about her that immediately drew his attention. Ramin swallowed and forced himself to regain his composure. Manon remained, as always, professionally stoic. May we come in? She asked. Suuz seemed to immediately understand that something was wrong. She looked at Ellen intently. Ellen gave a brief nod. Yes, come in. The women stepped aside and allowed Manon and Ramin to enter. Ramin sat down in the luxurious armchair beside the tall window in the sitting room. The upper sections of the glass panes were decorated with stained glass, and the room was lavishly furnished, with many burgundy accents. Manon sat down beside him. She placed her feet firmly on the floor and leaned forward. You're Suzette? Suuz. My name is Manon Zoot. I'm an agent, and this is Ramin Zubof. He is a social worker. Ramin looked at the women. Brit radiated unease, sharp panic, and something else, fear. Elin had her emotions well under control. A faint trace of panic was there, but nothing more. Then he looked at Suuz. Suuz, in turn, studied Manon. Her green eyes were serious, her brow slightly furrowed. Ramin felt nothing from the young woman, not a trace of emotion. He shifted in his seat and leaned slightly further forward. Still nothing. How was that possible? We found your parents at the family home, Manon said quietly. Her voice had changed. The professional distance was still there, but softer now. Suuz, I'm very sorry. For a moment, nobody spoke. Suuz looked at her without moving. Ramin watched her carefully. He expected the shock, the denial, the wave of grief that usually followed news like this, but he still felt nothing. Your parents were killed last night, Manon continued gently. The words settled into the room. Ramin leaned slightly forward. I know there is nothing we can say that will make this easier right now, he said quietly, but you don't have to deal with this alone. Suuz blinked once, then twice. Her expression remained composed. Your sister Charlotte was not at the house when we arrived, Manon continued. We haven't been able to find her yet. Do you know if she was staying somewhere else? Manon left out the fact that Mrs. Vandette's body had disappeared. She also left out how badly both of her parents had been mutilated. Suuz swallowed and looked down sadly. But Ramin felt no grief from her. He did not understand. No, I don't know where Charlotte is. Suuz looked directly at Manon. Her voice was remarkably calm. But you searched the entire house, didn't you? Suuz asked. My colleagues searched every room, Manon replied. Every cupboard, every hidden space. She gave Ramin a brief glance, and he continued. And we didn't only search, we also had a witch sense the space. Suuz blinked several times, but she said nothing. Ellen moved slightly forward on the sofa and looked between Manon and Ramin. Can Suuz see her parents? She asked. Maybe it would help if she identified them herself. The question hung in the room for a moment. I would like that, Suuz said. She spoke calmly and with remarkable composure, as if she were making a practical decision rather than facing the deaths of her parents. I want to identify my parents. Ramin frowned. Something was wrong. Everyone reacted differently to loss. He knew that better than anyone. Yet this silence felt unnatural. Unfortunately, the identification cannot take place tonight, Manon said. Suuz raised her eyebrows. Why not? The situation is… Manon briefly searched for the right words. Too confronting. We think it would be better if you tried to get some rest first. Can you stay here tonight? Suuz looked at Ellen. Ellen nodded without hesitation. That had been the plan anyway. Yes, Suuz said eventually. I can. Good, Manon said as she stood up. Then we will contact you tomorrow morning. Ramin remained seated for another moment. His gaze rested on Suuz. She really was beautiful. She looked back at him. Ramin swallowed, but Suuz answered Manon instead. That won't be necessary, she said. I will be at my family home tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Earlier that day, Ramin had stopped working unusually early. He had taken a shuttle bus home, from the old office building to his flat in the artisan district of the old city, and had collapsed onto his creaking sofa to watch his favorite horror series. A noble family, taking the law into their own hands. It featured several stunningly beautiful actresses, and beyond that, the series was violent and rather empty. Exactly the kind of entertainment where he did not have to think about anything. Ramin had opened a beer and allowed the bloodthirsty images to wash over him. His wet boots were standing against the heater to dry, and his jacket lay dripping over the metal folding chair. Then someone had hammered on the window, followed by the doorbell. Tom must have seen him lying there, slouched in front of the television, and had probably decided that noise was the quickest way to get him upright. I'm coming, he had grumbled. The old detective had entered and taken a seat in the worn armchair diagonally opposite him. The doorbell would have been sufficient, Ramin had said as a greeting. It's not good, Tom had replied. What followed was a grim account of everything that had happened. By the time he finished, Ramin understood why the old detective looked so shaken. Most days, Ramin's work consisted of little more than paperwork. He had trained as a therapist, a profession that had seemed a natural fit given his rather unusual gift as an Avaloq. Ramin could sense emotions: fear, grief, anger, panic, desire, joy. They flowed into him every day, whether he wanted them or not. The irony was that he had never actually practiced as a therapist. The office was merely a cover. Officially, he worked for the police as a therapist and social worker. Unofficially, he belonged to the federal agency, the FA, carrying out undercover assignments and assisting Tom's team whenever a case demanded more than ordinary detective work. Only Tom and a handful of others knew who he really worked for. Isa, his superior at the FA, contacted him only when necessary. Orders arrived in coded letters, over quiet drinks in anonymous pubs, or disguised as appointments with new clients. Ramin ran a hand through his messy dark hair. He took a deep breath, and the slight headache he had felt earlier that afternoon, the reason he had gone home early, began to creep back in. Tom had always been emotionally subdued. Ramin suspected that the passing years had dulled him, but now raw panic and pain hit him immediately. Ramin felt a sickening sensation in his stomach and rolled his broad shoulders, trying to push the discomfort away. Start at the beginning, he said. Tom nodded. Tom and his team had received a report that something was happening at the Grand Townhouse on Nordicade. Number 53 was an elegant building from the outside. At first glance, there had seemed to be nothing unusual, except for the open door. When they had entered, They had found the lady of the house with a bullet through her head, precisely where her eye had been. She had been lying in her own blood on the landing of the staircase. In the stately office, they had eventually found the man. He had fought back, and his hands were covered in blood. They were filled with deep cuts from a sharp object, most likely a knife. His raised hands and his large, powerful-looking body had not been enough to prevent his gruesome end. Mr. Vandette was missing both eyes and 2 fingers. He was covered in cuts, and it was likely that both of his arms had been broken. Timothy, his right-hand man, had been sick in the plant pot in the corner, while Tom had stared at the body for a long time, as if he expected the man himself to explain what had happened. "Time of death?" Tom had asked. Suuz, a witch with a plump figure, dressed in a pink furry jumper and jeans, had held her hands above the body. Her bright pink nails stood out as she sniffed. Her wide nostrils trembled. 3 hours ago. His spirit has departed. I mostly feel fear. You'd have to be pretty fearless not to, Timothy had groaned between bouts of vomiting. When they left the office to inspect the rest of the house, Tom had glanced at the photographs in the hallway. Everywhere there were hideous still-life paintings, but here, in Mr. Vandette's domain, there was finally something personal. Mr. and Mrs. Vandette had 2 daughters. The youngest was presumably still a child, with dark blue eyes and light brown, curly hair. The eldest was probably already an adult, although the photographs could have been older. She was exceptionally beautiful, with long, straight, dark brown hair, green eyes, and a wide grin as she smiled at the camera. There was no sign of either daughter. After a few phone calls, it became clear that the eldest daughter, Suuz, no longer lived at the family home. She was away at university and only returned to her parents' house from time to time. Charlotte, however, still lived there. Every room had been searched. Suuz had used her gift to search for a living soul in the house, but she had found nothing. When they were standing upstairs in one of the daughters' rooms, judging by the study books and a leaflet for a university ball, most likely Suzette's, a scream came from downstairs. Suuz had popped her pink chewing gum, and she and Tom had rushed towards the staircase. They descended as quickly as possible, but halfway down they came to an abrupt stop. Mrs. Vandette's body was gone. Timothy stood deathly pale beside the pool of blood. They had only been away from the body for a short time. Timothy had gone to wash his face, while Tom and Suuz had inspected the house. In that, what could it have been? 5 minutes, the body must have been taken. Ramin sat silently listening. He leaned forward, his fingertips pressed together. For a while he said nothing. Then he reached for the can of beer. He took a sip of the now lukewarm drink and rubbed his jaw, where stubble had begun to grow. "Have you managed to speak to the eldest daughter yet?" he asked. "No," Tom said. His panic was slowly fading, and Ramin sensed a slight irritation rising within him. "She is currently staying with the Agathos family on the other side of the city. Suzette is good friends with Elin Agathos." Tom rubbed a hand across his face. "The family is on a long journey to the south, but their youngest daughter stayed behind for her studies. At weekends, Elin often retreats to the family home with a few friends." House Agathos, together with House Vandette, was a well-known name in Skirt. 2 powerful families with a long history and bloodlines, directly descended from the once powerful Fae. He sighed. "At this hour, we thought it wiser not to call them and ask them to come to the station." Ramin sniffed. "How do you know all of that?" Tom gave a humorless laugh. "I went to Suzette's student accommodation. Her jealous flatmate, a lad named Mikos or Midas, was rather disappointed that he wasn't allowed to join the girls' weekend away." "Are you sure Mrs. Vandette was actually dead?" Ramin asked. Tom looked at him irritably. Blood and pieces of brain were lying on the stairs. "I don't think she was capable of simply walking away. She was cold, and Suuz felt no sign of life when she examined her. There wasn't even an emotion left behind. Shortly after death, raw emotions often remained. Witches, but also Avaloks like Ramin, could sense them." "What do you want me to do, Tom?" Ramin already felt the direction this was heading. "You're empathetic, Ramin, and since we want you involved in the case anyway, Isa has already approved it. You might as well come along as some kind of social worker for the police, to deliver the news." Ramin interrupted. He swore under his breath. He had never been unwilling to do the unpleasant jobs for the force, even if he rarely received any recognition for them. But telling loved ones that family members were dead, or worse, dead and somehow walking around, was not something he looked forward to. Still, he had to admit that being involved from the beginning of a case increased the chances of solving it properly. Ramin felt another faint trace of panic from Tom and looked at him carefully. "Ramin," Tom said tensely, "this case is different. It feels wrong. We need your help." And that was that.